Super.
So one of the first initiatives that you kind of pushed for was rethinking the whole path forward. Why was that the first thing you chose to do as your kind of interim presidency?
Well, I think because it was the biggest thing impacting the university over the last couple of years. I mean, there were some big changes made. We changed major academic organizations. We shut down colleges. We built new colleges. We moved departments. We centralized all the functional areas on campus, and we changed virtually every process that we deal with here on campus. So that path forward affected everybody. And I think clearly when I came into the job, there was a feeling that there was confusion, frustration, maybe a little bit of anger about things. And I wanted to make sure that we went back and looked at those things we've been going through for the last couple of years to make sure we understood what was causing them and was there a way to relieve some of that tension and maybe get to success in some of those projects that hadn't quite got there yet. So that was the intent. We'll see how it goes.
We did see in some of the observations in the Path Forward reassessment that there was some recruitment issue, or there have been recruitment issues, and I'm wondering how y'all are addressing that moving forward. Faculty and staff recruitment and retention.
Yeah, I think recruitment, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, is something we have to commit to, and we have to focus. We have to spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out how do we do it well all the time. I think we've had great success in recruiting in some areas and not so much success in recruiting in other areas. And in those areas where we haven't been as successful as we'd like, we need to take a hard look at what we've been doing and be willing to change the approach we've taken. I don't think problems with recruiting have been the result of a lack of effort by people, but I also don't think you can continue to try the same thing and not succeed and not be willing to change your approach. So we're in the process of looking at that right now. We have a recruiting summit coming up, for example, to look at how do we better recruit underrepresented students. It's not that we don't recruit them now, it's just that are there better ways to do it? Because there's some areas we haven't had much success in raising the numbers in. And we think we need to raise the numbers in a couple of areas.
There's tens of thousands of students and faculty here, and it'd probably be impossible to get every single person's input, but it seems like y'all got a pretty large response on this stuff. Do you feel like y'all had an adequate amount of voices across the board to get feedback to come to these conclusions?
Well, I think so. I certainly hope so. I think all you can do is provide as many opportunities as possible within the time available to you and hope people take advantage of that and provide a number of different fora to do that. So I think the assessment team spent a lot of time meeting face-to-face with targeted groups. They actually decided who to go meet with to make sure that the groups most affected, at least in our estimation, by the 41 different projects of the Path Forward had a chance to comment on them. And then we did open sessions for anybody else who wanted to comment and tried to catch everybody else and give them an opportunity by posting the report online and letting anybody who wanted to weigh in. But I'll tell you this, we didn't say no to any group that wanted to talk about this. And we actively looked for people to meet with us. So 120 plus meetings probably by the time we're done. And so that team did a remarkable job of bringing people into the conversation. And I think the faculty, staff, and students at A&M did a pretty remarkable job of jumping into the conversation, which is what we were hoping for. The most important thing about all this to me is the conversation. We have to keep that going. This should be a normal way of doing business, not maybe this focused or in this compressed a time period, but we ought to be talking about everything that's concerning us here and different approaches to solving problems and better ways to bring people together and ways to improve our programs, our facilities, our people services, everything. It's just kind of part of being a successful organization, and so that's the goal.
And it seems like it's been just a really time-consuming effort. Can you quantify maybe what percentage of your time has been spent on this since you took over a couple months ago?
A pretty good percentage, but it's also useful to me in a lot of other ways. So I'm getting to meet a whole lot of people around the university that I wouldn't have met as quickly without this process. I've been able to go meet with a number of groups that I need to meet with anyway and start conversations with them where I probably would have taken a longer time period to get to each of them without this. So while I've spent a lot of time on it, but it's also been really beneficial in terms of opening up channels of communication and knowing where those channels are, even in my case, because I hadn't worked at the university level before. So it's actually been a real plus for me.
When talking about academic freedom for librarians, you kind of mentioned acquiring and retaining materials that could be viewed controversial. Mm-hmm. Do you have concerns that could go against those DEI principles that were banned? And also, how do you plan to deal with political pressures that could come from that?
Well, State Bill 17 didn't prohibit academic activity, either teaching or research in these areas at all. I think that was a real good component of the bill. And I'm hoping that the authors did that intentionally because they understand that it's important for students to understand all sides of these issues. They're going out into a world where these issues exist, and I think they need to be prepared for that. So I don't think this is in any way against the intent of State Bill 17. And so I think having that material available is important to provide a well-rounded story on issues. And the librarians need to feel comfortable that they can do that. Now they have the same restrictions under academic freedom that our faculty members do too. So if the material is not pertinent to a particular course, they shouldn't be trying to build collections of it. And so I think they understand that. This is a very professional group of people who are just trying to do their job the right way.
Today, a lot of the decisions were made to kind of stay the course with some of the path forward changes. Are you worried that, and you mentioned that, it might be worse or just as chaotic to reverse some of these changes that were made? Are you concerned that the university is kind of still moving forward with ideas that might not be the best idea or way to do something or realign because they've just been put in motion? And how are you kind of going to address that or assess that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And that's what I struggle with. I'm pretty comfortable, though, that when I made my decisions, it was after I tried to decide by listening to all the people who had commented, all the people who wrote things online, what is the real issue here? Is it really the organizational structure, or is it the personal connection to the service you're trying to get? And if it's the lack of responsiveness in an HR activity or an IT activity, changing the organizational structure may help that, but I think you have to understand why it helps that. And if it probably isn't going to help that, then what is the thing that might? And so like in the case of the big centralization issues, I don't think whatever model you use will necessarily fix the concerns of the people who are expressing to me. And they will undo some of the good things that came out of the centralization, which was the feeling of belonging that some of our professionals in IT, HR, finance, et cetera, have of this new structure. They really feel like they've found a professional tribe, if you will, that's going to help guide them through their career and make sure they're doing the right things along the way and mentor them and give them the training they need and the job opportunities they need and make all that clear to them. That's one of the really positive things that we heard from a lot of people across the functional areas. And so if you go back to the old model, you do take that away. And so I'm just hesitant to make major changes back because I do believe they are as disruptive as the initial change, and we will go through all the same learning and adjusting process that we did the first time. If I believe that's the way to fix the problem, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. I just don't think that's the solution. I think the problem is on a much more tactical level. So how do we focus on customer service? How do we provide business services to individuals when they need it and in the way they need it? How do we make it more accessible? How do we respond quicker? It's people stuff. And my belief is that organizational models really aren't what changed the success in that area. It's more attention from leadership, proper training for managers, people-focused discussions inside organizations, and just a constant reminder that everybody here matters and they ought to be treated the best way we can possibly treat them.
We've heard of staffing issues in the new journalism department, and that some professors or new hires are being poached by other journalism departments across Texas or the country. Are you confident that by fall of 2024, the journalism department will have enough staff to accommodate the new students?
I heard everything except the first couple of words. Which office are we talking about?
The Department of Journalism.
Okay, I don't know. We'll see. I hope so. I think journalism would be a great major. I'd love to be a journalism major, quite frankly. I think it'd be a fascinating field to look into, and I'm not just kind of stuck up to you guys. I really think it's interesting. We need to have the stories told, good, bad, whatever. The people stories, the issue stories, they need to be clear. They need to be presented in an ethical, honest way, and then people can make their choices about how they feel about them. And I think if you have a journalism program that actually teaches men and women how to go do that, you do society a service. I think we do Texas a service. We do the nation a service. And that's what I hope the journalism program gets back to. I have talked to a number of former students from the journalism program. In fact, there is a journalism former student network, a journalist former student network. I did a Zoom call with them probably my second week in the office. And there are 5 people who are graduates of A&M journalism program who are now working, these folks worked at NBC Sports, they worked at the Houston Chronicle, they worked in Dallas-Fort Worth, one of them works at CNN, and they just talked about their experience as a journalism student at A&M. A couple of them worked on the BAT, that's how they got started, and they talk about how it affected their life and how it set them up for the career that they had always dreamed of. And these are really professional journalists who have been really successful, and they're the kind of people I would love to work with. And I want them telling our story, or any story, because they do it for all the right reasons. And I think that's what the program should do. Can we attract students who feel the same way and want to come here and grow that program quickly? We'll see. I hope so. The trick is going to be get people in the door who can then tell the story about how is the program. Is it good? Is it, you know, and if it is, more students will come. It's up to us now.
When do you expect any director for the program to be hired or be looked into?
I don't know. The college is doing that hire, the department's doing that hire. I have no idea where it stands right now. That's their job.
Bill Oliver, WTAW. Not only did you mention today is the 147th birthday of the university, this is also 2 months since you formed the team and charged them. Your presentation this morning, 2 months into being interim president, having to assimilate all this information and being able to deliver it extemporaneously, how are you able to accomplish that?
I just made most of it up. Most people don't know, so nobody will catch me. No, Bill, we've been talking about this a lot, actually. And thanks for acknowledging the work that the team did in 2 months. They did a phenomenal job, and they spent, I mean, every minute on this for the last couple of months. And they spent a lot of time keeping me posted after we got the draft report. And we spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people together about this. So this conversation's been pretty much nonstop for the last 2 months. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's allowed me to get to meet people, to understand issues around the university in a way I never would have otherwise. And so I think the issues are pretty straightforward. The thing that was most impressive to me was the passion of the people who came forward to talk about them. And as I said in the briefing, I was blown away by that. I was really uplifted by that, and I was really excited by it because that's the kind of university we should have. We should all feel really excited about our voice making a difference and about our voice being part of the conversation and feeling like I can speak up and somebody's going to listen. And I think we should feel that way about each other. And we have the people here to do that.
So
this is a phenomenal place.
Did your presentation become a gold standard for anybody trying to defend a dissertation or
my
compose something? Did you rely on your military background or what is it in your basic experience that you were able to do what you did this morning?
I think I have a brain that I don't use much, so there's a lot of space in there to cram stuff into it. But I don't know, Bill. It's the briefing this morning really is the result. It's just an outcome of all the work the team did. I followed their model. You know, they had the 41 activities. They put them in an order. They structured everything in terms of recommendation, response, and then now decision. So it was easy just to fall into the work they'd done, and I've been listening to it for long enough now that it just kind of made sense. It was nothing spectacular. I would love to have one of them get up and do it, but I needed to do it.
So how much more did you learn about the university through this process?
A ton. Yeah, a ton. And learned it a lot faster than I would have otherwise. And there's a lot of other areas now that I can go learn about that I probably wouldn't have been able to concentrate on while I learned about the areas that have some of these concerns. The downside of a process like this is it brings everybody's negative thoughts up first because you're trying to fix something that people don't feel is right. So you focus on the negative side of things, and you don't get to talk enough with people about the positive side of what they're doing, because everybody who's in that room today, every one of them, and every one of them listening online has done 1,000 great things for Texas A&M over the last year. We didn't talk about those things today, but that's the goal in the future. Get smart about all those things. Understand the phenomenal research that's being done. See how our labs are cooking. See how faculty members are kind of raising their profile and with it the university's profile. Take a look at what our folks are doing at McAllen and Galveston and DC and Qatar, and about how that's enhancing the reputation of A&M. I mean, there's so much phenomenal stuff happening here. That ought to be what we talk about more than what we talked about today. But the downside's been we needed to talk about that for a while. The upside is I think I understand the issues now, and we can focus on solutions and making ourselves better in all those great areas we already have.
Will the people who were kind of leading the path forward changes, are they going to be the same people who are remaining in charge to oversee these changes, the assessments kind of going forward, or are you planning any kind of staff realignment within your cabinet?
We'll probably do some changes over time, but no, there's nothing as a result of these decisions is, okay, you're out, you're in, you're out. We're gonna restructure the organization a little bit. We'll talk about that more in November. Just because I think it makes sense to restructure it a little bit. And there'll be some people who naturally, just because of timing, will be moving on over the next 6 or 8 months, I'm sure. And we'll try and hire the best possible people we can to come in and fill these roles that we may redefine a little bit. So yeah, there'll be some changes, but not because I think anybody did anything criminal, immoral, or just wrong. Everybody's been working hard, really hard.
And obviously this is a lot of change to be done by an interim president. Are you reassessing or thinking about going after the permanent position, or is that something that you
No, none of this has anything to do with that. I don't see when you're in the job, whether you're an acting or an interim or the president, the job's the job. You got to do the things that keep the university moving forward, and you got to figure out how you contribute best to that. I think you have to wait till we have a permanent professor to do things like long-range strategic planning. I don't think, I certainly wouldn't want to start, I mentioned in the briefing, Vision 2040, which I do think needs to happen at some point, but that ought to be done under a permanent president. And so there are things that I don't think I should step across the line into, but there's a lot of things that are near to midterm that we can't wait on. It's like this stuff. You can't wait for the permanent president to get after some of this stuff. And so I don't think there's any reason not to get after other things before we have a final decision on the permanent president. So it has nothing to do whether I'm interested or not. I just got to do this job until I'm not doing this job.
When it comes to State Bill 17, is there going to be any sort of a report at the least seeing what exactly was affected by that? Because we saw the DEI office shut down, and we've heard other programs are getting shut down, like Women in Engineering program. So is there any sort of report that's going to be released saying what's affected exactly?
Yeah, I don't think what you said is accurate, at least not because of State Bill 17. The DEI office, any office titled DEI was very clear, you have to shut it down in the state bill. It's got to be shut down by the 1st of January. But Women in Engineering is not something that we have to shut down, as long as it's open to men. These organizations can exist, they just can't be exclusive to a particular demographic, no matter what the demographic is. That's what the bill says.
Yeah, we were heard that when the vice president told us that the program was getting, the funding was funded by DEI funds, so that's getting taken away too. Is that going to be kind of released in a report as well to see what exactly was getting funded and what kind of funding is going to stop as well?
I think the funding is a different issue. If the DEI funding is going away, but it doesn't mean we don't have funding to support programs. There are a number of different organizations around campus that are not going to shut down. They're going to continue. We just have to make sure they're open to everyone. And so anybody who wants to join, a Women in Engineering, Women's Faculty Network, we have one of those as well. There's no intent to shut down the Women's Faculty Network. Men can join it. The whole idea is come learn about the issues facing women faculty members. As a male supervisor in the university, I'd like to understand those. So that would be something I'd be interested in joining. And so I think that the state bill is not restricting these organizations. If it's a student organization, some of them can't be university organizations. So they can be student organizations, and the university can provide support for them. But if it's a university organization, like Women Faculty Network, the only rule is it's got to be inclusive. And you have to provide the same level of support to each one of these organizations. The university can't support one more than others. That makes sense? That's fair. We can do that. And so the only thing specifically we have to do is get rid of any offices that were labeled as and focused purely on DE&I.
What sort of financial and time commitment will this require moving forward as far as the path forward? I don't know if you could kind of broadly characterize how you view these really wide-reaching.
Yeah, it's been a big impact financially on the university to do some of these things. And if you look at some of the facility infrastructure that has to go with them as you stand up new colleges, et cetera, or expand programs, there's a capital investment required too. And those investments are big. And so one of the reasons we need to step back and take a look at all of those kind of projects is I want to make sure we know what we can actually afford. And what we have on the books says, okay, if we can figure out a funding plan, we'd like to do that. And that requires prioritizing these projects. And we just need to have an organization that looks a little more broadly across everything at the university that actually helps prioritize the things that we want to put funding toward as a university. And that'll also help us working with foundations and donors and say, look, this is our biggest priority, here's why. We'd love your support if you can provide it. But we have to be able to tell that story clearly.
I guess I was also wondering if more funding or financial need is needed to move the rest of this forward as far as the reassessment.
New funding, more financial need, support is always needed. And at a university, everybody wants more. But when we talk about planning for the future, I think we have to assume we have what we have, and we can't count on additional funding to do the things that are most important to us, if that makes sense. We have to operate within our budget, just like you have to operate within your budget. And if we get more support for a particular project or a particular activity from the state or from a donor, that's great. And we can go ask for those things, but if we don't get it, that can't stop what we consider to be the most important thing we do at the university. So I think you plan within your budget and you hope you get more, but don't count on it.
So there's no like price tag associated with what this new kind of path forward decisions are going to cost the university?
We looked at the cost. There's not a wrap-up cost, no. We have the amount we have for operating budgets, everything we talked about today, within, except for new facilities to support a college, for example, like performance visualization and fine arts. Everything is in our budget now. We can do this within our current funding. The capital projects are different, and we have to make sure we have the ability to raise funds. We've got to figure out where the funding for those things is coming from. So the idea is build a requirement for it, build a business plan that shows why it's a worthwhile thing for the university and where you would break even on an investment, what kind of return on investment are you going to get, and how it would benefit student programs, activities, et cetera, and then try and get funding for that program. But if we're going to proceed forward with performance visualization and fine arts, it cannot be dependent on having a building. We'll find a building, we'll find space for them, and we'll have to do that right now. But assuming we're going to get a couple of more buildings and the success of this college hinges on that, that's not good planning.
When you talked about those using in-house people instead of consulting firms, you got quite the big applause there. But my question is, are there enough staff on hand with time on their hands to get those studies done? There were quite a lot of initiatives and studies mentioned.
Yeah, there are. And you may have to incentivize them in some way to do it. But we have the expertise here to do some of this stuff. And I didn't mention a lot of them that we need a lot of people on with specific high-end expertise. The capacity study requires that. And we have people whose job it is to look at a lot of the issues around campus. We have people who are traffic experts, parking experts, who do this full-time in their jobs. They have all the data we need to do their part of the assessment. We need people who have a different perspective, or we have architects in the School of Architecture who actually can look at a campus master plan along with our current planners and say, well, there's some issues here that I wouldn't see, but they see immediately, and throw those into the conversation so we can have a different conversation than we would have if we kept it just to the people who do this day to day. We need to know what students are frustrated by. If I can't get to class, I got 20 minutes, but I can't get from over there to over here anymore. There's too much traffic and the buses aren't turning fast enough and I just can't make it. So I have to change my schedule, which means I have to have a night class now, which means I can't work. But we need to be looking into all that and how growth has affected us in those ways so we can figure out where to prioritize both effort and resources to figure out how to fix these things and improve them so students don't have those frustrations in the future.
And another quick one, the performance, visual, and fine arts option B that you mentioned, what is the option B?
I won't get all the details right. The difference between the options are the number of academic programs that they add at the beginning. So instead of trying to grow every department and every degree program, they start with a focused set of degree programs. They may keep visualization at the same level of what they're doing now, which is a great program. But instead of trying to grow that now into a new PhD program, for example, they may keep that static, increase masters in dance programs, for example. and start with that, add the faculty to be able to do that as kind of step one. So option B could become option A, which is adding more programs and more faculty, but first we got to make sure that we can afford that over time. So start with something we can accomplish, get it right, and then we'll look at growing it, is the idea of option B.
I think we've got time for 2 more quick questions.
Was there anything about the process or any outcomes conclusions you came to that surprised you in the end?
Yeah, what a good question.
Maybe something you weren't expecting?
Yeah, the support for the librarians was not surprising because we had great librarians and everybody loved them. And they did great stuff for the colleges. What surprised me was the librarians saying, no, I don't want to go back to a tenured job right now. We just went through that. It was really traumatic for us to lose that. We just don't want to pull that bandage off again. So let's not do that. Let's just figure out how to provide the greatest library services we can. And we've built the model for that over the last 2 years. We just don't have the resources to execute it. But that surprised me a little bit. I thought they put the university first. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it was a really great thing to see. And so they're worried about services they provide to faculty and to students, and they don't want to have this issue of trying to figure out how to get back to tenure, get in the way of that. Let's get all that right, and if it comes up later, we'll talk about it later. I just thought it was a great selfless approach that they took to this thing.
Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about distrust from faculty in the administration and kind of where A&M goes from here. How are you measuring in your interimship the progress of whether you are rebuilding that trust, and how do you think where do you think you stand right now?
I'm going to skip the second half of that because I don't know. I measure it by looking in your eyes. That sounds corny, I know. But I think I know the people I can trust when I'm talking to them. And I think I know if they have respect for my views when I'm talking to them. As far as how do you go about getting it and what metrics you use, I mean, I looked out in the audience today and saw 600 people and another, I don't know how many. How many were online? Do we know the number? 2,000. They don't have to do that. They cared enough to be there. And it's not trust in me, it's trust in a process, trust in this university, trust in an effort to improve. And I think if they didn't feel that this was really something they should be engaged in, they wouldn't engage. So I think that's a pretty good metric. People came to these listening sessions. 2,500 people wrote comments on the survey. 40,000 people looked at the report online. Those are all really good indicators that people at least are hoping that they can trust in this process. And I think that's where you have to start. Trust it's not a snap your fingers thing. It's a water on rock thing. You just show up every day, you treat people right, you do your best, and over time they'll learn they can count on that. And that reliability, I think, leads to trust, which leads to confidence. And I think we got to think about that at every level of this university. If you're leading or managing people, the number one goal ought to be, my people should trust me. And if I can be worthy of that, then we're winning.
Anything that wasn't asked that you want to mention? I know you've been talking for now 2 hours, so we appreciate it.
Thanks all of you for being here, for paying attention to this, and for paying attention to what our faculty and our staff thinks. And thanks for being around to mentor our great young journalists here in the battalion who all want to be you. And most importantly, thanks for telling the story. I mean, even when it's not good, it needs to be told. And I just admire the fact that you take the time to do it right. So thank you.